When I went to give my wife gold jewelry, turns out someone beat me to it, but it was a small thing compared to what happened next. My fingers grazed the leather strap of the watch she'd gifted me last Christmas. A rare moment of spontaneity from her. Today was her birthday, and I was determined to surprise her in return. I recalled a moment weeks ago when she'd admired a pair of earrings in a boutique window. That memory lingered in my mind. I decided today was the day to show her that I still understood her heart. But surprises often come with unexpected turns. At the jewelry store, where the sparkle of diamonds and gleam of gold filled the air, I found myself caught off guard. The shop assistant listened to my request and then paused before suggesting, "Would you mind bringing in her previous gift? We can adjust the size for her." "Previous gift?" I repeated, my voice tinged with confusion. The assistant smiled, misreading my reaction. "The bracelet, sir. She mentioned it was from you. It's beautiful but just a bit too small." The words hit me like a sudden gust of icy wind. My chest tightened. A bracelet? I hadn't bought her any bracelet. I managed a polite smile and excused myself, but the excitement I had felt earlier was now replaced by a growing unease. The rest of the day passed in a haze as I tried to make sense of what I'd heard. Could it have been a gift from her mother? Or perhaps her sister? Yet, deep down, an unsettling doubt began to stir, one that refused to be silenced. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for a message from her, but each glance weighed heavier than the last. When no text came, I resolved to push my concerns aside. I had plans, dinner at her favorite restaurant, and I would stick to them. At least I would try. As night fell, my doubts hardened into resolve. Sitting at my laptop, I scrolled through our bank statements, a task I usually avoided but now tackled with sharp focus. Line by line, I searched for answers until I found it. Luxury boutique, $1,850. The date matched the weekend she'd attended a school retreat, one I hadn't been invited to because it was supposedly for educators only. My stomach sank. Later that evening, while fastening my cufflinks, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't just a husband eager to celebrate his wife's birthday. He was someone on the edge of uncovering something darker. The restaurant was dimly lit. She arrived late, as she often did these days. Her smile was bright, but it couldn't hide the tension in her eyes. "Happy birthday," I said, handing her the gift-wrapped earrings. Her surprise appeared genuine, though a shadow briefly crossed her face. A flicker of guilt or perhaps something deeper. "They're perfect," she said softly, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "How did you know?" "Just paying attention," I replied, my tone warm but feeling foreign even to myself. We toasted, but her hand shook slightly as she lifted her glass. In that moment I understood. The evening wasn't just about my surprise for her. It was about what fate had in store for me. The drive home was steeped in silence. She rested her head against the window, her expression serene yet far away, while I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing. The bracelet, the boutique, the cracks in her stories. I had always trusted her, content with the surface of things. But tonight had shifted something within me. A quiet, irreversible fracture in the foundation of our life together, at home. She slipped off her heels by the door and began humming a tune I didn't recognize. "I'll clean up," I offered. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the quiet living room. I waited until I heard the sound of the shower before I moved. Each step toward her handbag felt heavy, my stomach churning. Was this what my life had become? Rifling through my wife's belongings like some distrustful stranger? But the doubt was relentless, pushing me forward. Her bag held the usual: phone, wallet, sunglasses. Nothing unusual, until my fingers brushed a small velvet jewelry box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a delicate, ornate bracelet, the kind of gift that spoke of intimacy. Beneath it, a small card read, "For every moment we've stolen, J." That single letter burned itself into my thoughts as I stared at the inscription, gripping the box so tightly I feared I might crush it. It wasn't just the implication of betrayal that stung. It was the calculated way it had been hidden. This wasn't a careless mistake. It was deliberate, practiced. The next morning, she was already gone when I woke up. A cheerful note awaited me on the counter. Gone to school early for meetings. Dinner tonight? XO. I stared at her handwriting. Its once familiar loops and swirls now feeling like a foreign language. My appetite was gone, replaced by an urgent need for answers. At work, I tried to focus, throwing myself into tasks, but my thoughts were elsewhere. That single letter, J, circled in my mind like a dark cloud. I hovered over her social media accounts, scanning for anything out of place. She rarely posted personal updates, but I noticed a pattern in her recent activity. Photos with colleagues, tag dinners, and group events. Digging deeper, I found a picture from her school retreat buried in the comments. A name stood out, Jonathan. Great retreat as always, Jonathan, someone had written. Another comment had tagged him in a group photo. There he was, standing next to her, his arm casually draped over her shoulder. Jonathan. J. My chest tightened as I stared at his face. Smiling, confident, as though he belonged wherever he went. Was this the man behind the card? That evening, I approached the topic with forced casualness as we sat at dinner. How was the retreat with your colleagues? I asked. She hesitated for just a second too long. It was good, she replied, smiling. A bit tiring but productive. Why do you ask? Just curious. I noticed someone tagged a Jonathan in the photos. Do you work closely with him? Her fork stilled midair. Jonathan? Oh, Jonathan is just on the committee. He's harmless. Why do you ask? Harmless. The word lingered in my mind, begging to be questioned. She had answered too quickly, her response feeling rehearsed. No reason, I said, forcing a smile. But as I watched her look away, a flicker of unease crossed her face. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The bracelet, the card, Jonathan. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage suddenly felt like a lie. By dawn, my decision was made. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I would find it myself. The next day, I couldn't shake the weight of suspicion. My routine felt robotic, every task empty and meaningless. Even at work, where precision was my strength, I found myself distracted. I needed answers, and I wouldn't stop until I got them. I began piecing things together, starting with her schedule. She had always been predictable, her days structured. But recently, there had been small, noticeable changes. Extra meetings, late nights, sudden commitments that left her unreachable. At the time, I had brushed them off as part of her demanding career. Now they felt like cracks in the foundation. That afternoon, I made my first move. I called her school, pretending I needed to deliver an important document. The receptionist's voice was polite but confused. Actually, she's not here today, she said. She took a personal day. My stomach dropped. A personal day? I repeated, keeping my tone steady despite the storm inside me. Do you know when she'll be back? Tomorrow, I believe. Is everything okay? Yes, of course. Thank you. I hung up and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. She had lied. But why? And where was she? That evening, when she walked through the door, I immediately noticed the faint tension in her movements, the forced brightness of her smile. Hey, she said, setting her bag down. How was your day? It was fine, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Yours? She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Busy. Meetings all day. I'm exhausted. The lie hung in the air like a storm cloud. I wanted to demand answers, to confront her, but I held back. Not yet. I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. Later that night, while she showered, I found myself in her office. Her laptop was password protected, as expected, but her phone was charging on the desk, and unlocked. Guilt tugged at me, but the memory of the bracelet and the card overpowered it. I scrolled through her recent messages, my heart pounding. Most of them were harmless. Chats with friends, reminders from school. Then I found it, a conversation with someone saved as J. My pulse quickened as I opened the thread. The messages were short but suggestive. Jay, thanks for today. You're amazing as always. Her. It was exactly what I needed. Can't wait for the next time. The dates and times matched the school retreat. My hands shook as I scrolled further, but the thread wasn't long. She must have deleted most of their conversations. Still, it was enough to confirm my fears. This wasn't just a casual friendship. By the time she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel and humming softly, I had replaced her phone and steadied my breathing. "Everything okay?" she asked, her smile warm and practiced. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. Inside, a storm raged. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Just catching up on some emails." She kissed my cheek and disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. That night, sleep was impossible. I replayed the last few months over and over, scrutinizing every detail under the harsh glare of suspicion. The late nights, the new clothes she'd suddenly started buying, the time she came home faintly smelling of a cologne that wasn't mine. All of it felt like puzzle pieces falling into place. I realized I couldn't confront this on my own anymore. I needed help. Someone who could give me clarity and confirm the truth. The next morning, I made a call. "Lawrence Investigations," a calm voice answered. "I need your services," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. Discreetly, "Of course. What can we help you with?" I paused, feeling the weight of my words. "I think my wife is having an affair. I need to know for sure." The line went quiet for a moment, a silence heavy with unspoken understanding. "We'll handle it," the investigator replied. "Let's set up a meeting." Whatever the outcome, I was finally on the path to uncovering the truth. The investigator's office was tucked away in a quiet corner of town, the kind of place designed to be unnoticed. A faded sign reading "Lawrence Investigations" hung outside. Lawrence, a man in his late 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted me with a firm handshake and motioned for me to sit. "Mr. Adrian," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Tell me everything." I laid it all out. The bracelet, the cryptic note, the unexplained absences, the evasive answers. Lawrence listened carefully, jotting down notes as I spoke. "You're looking for confirmation, not just suspicion," he said finally. "You need proof." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I need to know." "Here's what we'll do," Lawrence said. "We'll start with the basics. Tracking her movements, logging interactions, gathering evidence. Discreetly, of course. And if—" I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "If there's something to find, we'll find it," Lawrence said gently. "You deserve the truth." The following days were a peculiar limbo. I went about my life as though nothing was wrong. Work meetings, casual dinners with her, and smiling conversations. But underneath the surface, I was waiting for the call that would confirm or dispel my fears. Each day, Lawrence checked in with updates. His team had started surveillance, monitoring her movements and logging her destinations. The first few days brought nothing unusual: school, errands, a quick stop at a coffee shop. But on the third day, everything changed. "She met someone today," Lawrence said over the phone, his voice calm but deliberate. "A man. They had lunch together at a restaurant downtown. Based on their body language, it wasn't business." I gripped the phone tightly. "Who is he?" "We're still identifying him," Lawrence replied. "But we'll have answers soon." After the call, I sat in my car, staring blankly at the dashboard. My worst fears were beginning to materialize, yet without the full picture, I felt trapped in limbo. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why? That evening, I watched her more intently than ever. She seemed calm, even cheerful, asking me about my day and sharing stories about hers. If she was hiding something, she did it with practiced ease. "Anything interesting happened today?" I asked casually over dinner. She smiled, taking a sip of wine. "Not really. Just another busy day at school." The lie was flawless, delivered without hesitation. But now, armed with Lawrence's report, I knew better. The next morning, Lawrence called again. "We've identified him," he said without preamble. "His name is Jonathan Brown. He's on the board of directors for her school." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Jonathan, the man from the retreat photos, the one who had left the note with the bracelet. He wasn't just a colleague, he was someone with influence, someone she saw regularly. "He's married," Lawrence continued. "No kids. We're still digging into his background, but there's already enough to suggest an ongoing relationship." "Show me," I said, my voice low but resolute. Within an hour, I sat in my car with a folder of photos in my hands. There they were, sitting at a small cafe, their heads close together, laughing like they were in their own little world. In another photo, they walked side by side, her hand brushing his arm. The intimacy was undeniable. That evening, I sat across from her at the dinner table, the weight of the photos pressing down on me. She talked about mundane things, grading papers, an upcoming charity event, but all I could hear was the echo of her betrayal. I had enough evidence to confront her now, to demand the truth. But something held me back. I wasn't ready, not yet. If she had turned our life into a game, I needed to understand the rules before making my move. The folder of photos sat on my desk like a Pandora's box, each image a fresh wound. Her laughter, the way she leaned toward him, the casual touch of his hand on her back. It all felt deliberate. By the time I reached the last photo, her hand lightly resting on his arm, I realized she wasn't just betraying me. She was living a double life, one I had been completely shut out of. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I opened my laptop and began digging deeper. If Jonathan Brown was the other man, I needed to know everything about him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. His professional profile painted a picture of a man with decades of experience in education administration, a board member for several charities, and an impeccable public image. Yet, his personal life was strikingly sparse. Just a few mentions of a wife, no children, no controversies. It all seemed almost too perfect. I cross-referenced his name with any recent news and stumbled upon a small, unassuming article buried in a local paper. Local school board member hosts annual retreat. The article listed the attendees, and there she was, my wife, credited as one of the key organizers. This wasn't a casual affair. It was embedded into her professional life, carefully woven through every late-night meeting, every retreat, every event. Suddenly, it all clicked. The next morning, Lawrence called with an update. "There's more," he said, his voice steady. "We've been tracking her financial activity. There's a joint account, her name and his." "A joint account?" I repeated, the words heavy on my tongue. "Yes, regular deposits and withdrawals for months now. We're still analyzing where the money is going, but it's clear they're planning something." I sat in stunned silence. A joint account wasn't just infidelity. It meant shared plans, shared resources, a shared future. "What's the next step?" I asked. "We keep digging," Lawrence replied. "There's still more to uncover." That evening, I sat across from her at dinner, the weight of my discoveries pressing heavily on me. She seemed more relaxed than ever, animatedly discussing an upcoming gala at the school. "Jonathan is heading the fundraiser this year," she said, her tone casual. "It's going to be a big event." I studied her carefully, noting the ease with which she mentioned his name, as if daring me to react. "You seem close," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, just for a moment, before replying, "Not really. He's just dedicated to the school, like I am." A lie. I saw it in the way her eyes flickered and the way she fidgeted with her napkin. But I said nothing, letting her believe she had convinced me. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I pored over everything Lawrence had sent me. Financial statements, surveillance photos, even snippets of overheard conversations. The picture that emerged was one of deliberate, calculated deceit. The joint account, I discovered, wasn't just for personal expenses. Payments had been made for hotel bookings, gifts, and, most damning of all, a down payment on a property in a neighboring city. My heart pounded as I stared at the address. This wasn't just an affair. They were building a life together, a future that didn't include me. The next day, I drove to the address. It was a modest townhouse tucked away on a quiet street. As I parked across the road, my hands trembled with adrenaline. From the outside, it looked ordinary enough, but the sight of her car in the driveway made my blood run cold. I sat there for hours watching and waiting. Eventually, the door opened, and there she was, walking out with Jonathan. They laughed as they spoke, their body language relaxed and natural, as though they were coming home. They embraced briefly before parting ways, her driving off in her car, and him heading back inside. I remained parked long after they were gone, my mind racing. The evidence was irrefutable now. She wasn't just having an affair. She was building a new life while I clung to the fragments of the one we had built together. When I finally drove home, I felt hollow. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion or a theory. It was a brutal, undeniable reality. But this wasn't over, not yet. If she thought she could dismantle our life and move on without consequences, she was wrong. I had played the trusting husband long enough. It was my turn to act. The following morning, I woke with a new sense of purpose. The anguish of betrayal had crystallized into cold resolve. I called Lawrence first thing. "We need to escalate," I told him. "No more passive observation. I want the full picture, where they've been, what they've said, every cent they've spent. I need everything." "You'll have it," Lawrence assured me. "We're already working on it." That day, I went through the motions of my life flawlessly. At work, I cracked jokes in meetings, reviewed contracts with precision, and even praised my team for their efforts. To anyone watching, I was the same man I had always been, focused, composed, content. But beneath the surface, I was a man on the edge, fueled by quiet, simmering rage. That evening, when I got home, she was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. The sight of her, so calm, so composed, made my stomach churn. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice warm and casual. "Busy," I replied, shrugging off my coat. "Yours?" "Nothing special," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "Just the usual." The lies came so easily to her now. But I wasn't the same man I had been a week ago. I didn't need her answers anymore. I was finding my own. That night, Lawrence sent me the first major update. "We've confirmed the property," he said. "It's registered under both their names. Purchased 6 months ago." 6 months. I repeated, my voice cold. It lined up perfectly with her increased absences and newfound enthusiasm for school events. "There's more," Lawrence continued. "We've recovered some of their correspondence. They're planning to use the property as a retreat. Something personal, just for them." I closed my eyes, his words sinking in like lead. "And the financials?" "Mostly gifts and property expenses," he said. "But there's one transaction that stands out. A payment to a divorce attorney. Hers. She wasn't just preparing to leave me. She was preparing to erase me from her life entirely." The next morning, I drove to the townhouse again. This time, I brought a camera. If she wanted to rewrite the narrative of our marriage, I would ensure the truth wasn't buried. I parked discreetly, camera in hand, and waited. It didn't take long before her car pulled up. She parked, glanced around briefly, and walked inside. A few moments later, Jonathan arrived. Their greeting, a casual, practiced kiss, confirmed everything. My camera clicked with precision, capturing every damning frame. When I returned home that evening, she was on the couch, a book in hand, as if nothing had changed. "Hey," she said, smiling up at me. "You're home late." "Long day," I replied, mirroring her smile. "How about you?" "Nothing exciting," she said, stretching. "Just errands and grading." The lie hung in the air between us, bitter and undeniable. I swallowed it down, keeping my tone neutral. "I thought we could go to the lake this weekend. Get away for a bit." Her smile faltered for the briefest moment. "Oh, I'd love to. But I already promised Jonathan I'd help with the fundraiser on Saturday." There it was again. His name slipped into her alibi, almost daring me to react. "No problem," I said lightly. "Maybe another time." She relaxed and returned to her book, while my mind churned with the weight of the documents Lawrence had sent earlier. Divorce filings. Her name on the paperwork, dated for submission in just a few weeks. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in my office, the evidence spread out before me. Photos, financial records, text messages. Each piece painted a picture of a woman who had already made her choice. But she hadn't accounted for me. She thought she could rewrite our story without consequence. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I began drafting my own plans, every detail methodically laid out. If she thought I'd go quietly, she was wrong. The weekend passed in eerie calm. Saturday morning, she left for the fundraiser, impeccably dressed. I watched from the window as her car disappeared down the street, my emotions a mix of fury and numbness. When I was certain she was gone, I called Lawrence. Did she arrive at the townhouse? I asked. Yes, he replied. They've been there for about an hour. Keep watching, I said tightly. Let me know when she leaves. The hours crawled by as I finalized my preparations. The folder of evidence, now meticulously organized, sat on my desk. Bank statements, surveillance photos, her correspondence with Jonathan. Everything was there, alongside a copy of her divorce filing. By evening, she returned home, her demeanor light and cheerful. How was your day? She asked, slipping off her shoes. Quiet, I said, forcing a smile. Did the fundraiser go well? It did, she said brightly. We raised a lot for the school. Another lie, another betrayal. The next morning, over coffee, I broached the subject again, this time with feigned casualness. You know, I said, it's great that you're so involved with the school. I've been meaning to get to know Jonathan better. Maybe we could have dinner with him sometime. Her hand froze briefly on her cup. Oh, I don't think that's necessary, she said, her laugh sounding forced. He's just a colleague. Still, I pressed, keeping my tone light. It'd be nice to put a face to the name. You've mentioned him so much lately. Her lips tightened into a strained smile. Maybe. He's a busy guy. Her evasion was obvious, her discomfort palpable. But I let it go, knowing I had already won the real battle. On Monday, I took my plans a step further. While she was at work, I met with a lawyer. Divorce, I said, the word bitter in my mouth. But not until it's on my terms. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I placed the folder of evidence on his desk. This is everything, her affair, the financial dealings, the townhouse. She thinks she's in control, but I want to turn the tables. He flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. This is solid. We could file immediately. Not yet, I said firmly. I want her to see what she's done, to understand that I know everything. You're playing a dangerous game, he warned. I know, I said, my voice calm. But she needs to feel the weight of her choices. That evening, I began to set the stage. While she cooked dinner, I printed the photos Lawrence had taken of her and Jonathan. I placed them carefully in an envelope marked with her name, alongside copies of the financial statements and divorce filings. After dinner, I left the envelope on her pillow and retreated to my office, waiting. When she came upstairs, I heard the soft rustle of the envelope being opened. A sharp intake of breath followed, then silence, thick, foreboding silence. Moments later, she appeared in the doorway, the photos trembling in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. What is this? She asked, her voice barely audible. You tell me, I said, leaning back in my chair. Because it sure looks like you've been busy. She stepped into the room, her composure crumbling. It's not what you think. Stop, I said sharply. Don't insult me by lying anymore. I know about Jonathan. I know about the townhouse. I know everything. For the first time, I saw her for who she truly was. A stranger wrapped in deceit. I trusted you, I said. I built a life with you, gave you everything. And this is how you repay me? Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't move me. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. It just It got out of control. Out of control? I repeated, standing now, my anger barely restrained. You built a second life, a second home, and you call that out of control? She began to sob, covering her face with her hands. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I didn't know how to stop. You didn't want to stop, I said coldly. And now you'll face the consequences. I left her there, crumpled on the floor, and walked out into the night. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. When I returned, the house was silent. Her car was gone, and her keys were missing. I wasn't surprised. Running was what she did best. The next morning, her absence was glaring. Her side of the bed untouched. Her phone going straight to voicemail. I texted Lawrence. She's gone. Find her. His reply came quickly. Already on it. By evening, Lawrence called. She's at the townhouse, he said. With him. Keep watching, I said tightly. Let me know when she leaves. Hours later, the message came. She just left. Heading home. I was ready. The folder of evidence was arranged neatly on the dining table, alongside a copy of the divorce papers. When she walked through the door, her face was weary, but she froze when she saw the folder. Her eyes darted between it and me, panic replacing fatigue. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. You know exactly what it is? I replied, my tone flat and devoid of emotion. Sit down. She hesitated but obeyed, sinking into the chair across from me. Her hands fumbled with the folder, her breath hitching as she flipped through its contents. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Doing this? I repeated, leaning forward. You're the one who did this. You're the one who tore us apart, who lied, who betrayed everything we built. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. I didn't mean to. Stop. I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't insult me by pretending this was an accident. You don't accidentally open joint accounts. You don't accidentally buy a townhouse. You don't accidentally destroy a marriage. Her sobs grew louder as she covered her face with her hands. I never wanted to hurt you, she managed through broken breaths. You just wanted more, I said coldly, finishing her sentence for her. You wanted him. Her silence was answer enough. You'll sign these, I said, sliding the divorce papers toward her. You'll agree to the terms. No lawyers, no court battles. You take what you brought into this marriage and leave the rest. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You can't expect me to. I can. I cut her off. And I do. You've already made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. Her face was a mix of shock and anguish. You don't understand, she finally said, her voice breaking. I was lost. I felt invisible. And Jonathan, he made me feel alive again. The words hit like a punch, but I refused to let it show. So this is my fault? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I wasn't enough for you, so instead of talking to me, you decided to destroy everything we had? Her head dropped, her shoulders trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, standing. Sorry doesn't erase what you've done. I left her sitting there, the divorce papers and the damning folder in front of her, and retreated to my office. Hours passed as I sat in the dark, staring at the faint glow of my computer screen. By the time I heard her car start and drive away, I felt nothing. The next morning, she was gone. Half her closet emptied, her belongings hastily packed. On the dining table was a tear-stained note. I'll sign the papers. I just need time. I crumpled it without reading further. Time was something I no longer owed her. The woman I had loved, the life we had built, it was all reduced to ash by her choices. But I wasn't finished. If she thought she could escape unscathed, she was wrong. Lawrence called a few days later, his voice professional as always. She's moved in with him, he said. The townhouse. The confirmation stung, sharp and bitter. Keep watching, I replied flatly. There's more, he continued. Jonathan's wife filed for divorce. It's getting messy. Claims of financial misconduct, infidelity. It might be worth leveraging. Send me everything you've got on him, I said. That evening, I began piecing together my strategy. Jonathan wasn't just her lover. He was her accomplice in deceit. I didn't just want to end my marriage. I wanted accountability. His financial dealings, his professional reputation, everything was fair game. I started discreetly, planting seeds of doubt where they'd be noticed. A call to a mutual acquaintance on the school board. An anonymous tip to a journalist. By the end of the week, Jonathan's name was splashed across local gossip columns. His finances were under scrutiny. The townhouse flagged as suspicious due to irregularities in school board accounts. Meanwhile, my lawyer assured me the divorce was proceeding smoothly. She signed the agreement, he said, flipping through the documents. If she contests it, we've got enough evidence to bury her. Good, I said. Make sure she knows it. The fallout was swift. Jonathan resigned from the school board as his financial misconduct became public. His divorce turned into a spectacle, his wife airing their dirty laundry in court. My ex-wife faded from the public eye, retreating into the shadows she had created. As for me, I began to rebuild. The house, once a monument to shared dreams, became a space that reflected only me. I painted the walls, bought new furniture, and erased every trace of her. Slowly, I reclaimed my life. Months passed, and the dust began to settle. Jonathan's downfall was complete, and whispers about my ex-wife's actions traveled through our social circles. But their drama no longer consumed me. I had found something more valuable than vengeance. Peace. One evening, as I stood in my newly renovated kitchen preparing dinner for Camille, a kind, thoughtful woman I had started seeing, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The man staring back at me was different, wiser, resilient, and for the first time in a long time he looked happy.